Welcome back to For the Record. Gene Barr, our guest, who's the Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Joined the Chamber, as we mentioned, in 2003. I've got a follow-up to the education question. There's a lot of people at the local all the way up to the highest about keeping our students here in Pennsylvania, the quote-unquote brain drain. I mean, what's the use if you're going to educate, students here in Pennsylvania? They're not going to stay here, grow business, and raise families here.
Absolutely. The best way I know of to do that is, Jed, find good jobs for them. And unfortunately, when you look at what Pennsylvania's done over recent decades, we have not been able to create the kind of good paying jobs that'll keep our kids here. We've got some of the best educational institutions in the world, not in the U.S., in the world, in this Commonwealth. And we've not done a good job keeping them here, whether it's at the bachelor's level, whether it's out of the medical schools, because unfortunately our legal climate tends to drive them elsewhere. But we've got to create the kind of good paying jobs that'll keep our kids here. And some of that is, which I'm sure that we'll talk a bit about, is Marcellus has real promise for doing that. But we've got to do that. How do you keep jobs here? You address the tax structure, you address the legal system, our labor issues, all these things have to be taken on and structurally reformed. We can't keep throwing money at it from a perspective of going out and handing giant checks to companies.
Yeah, it's funny, that's my next question,
okay.
Was how to improve. The state's got a horrible reputation to be more friendly to small business. I mean, we can talk about Fortune 500 companies all we want. They're huge, they're big,
that's right.
We got to have them. The backbone is the small business, the risk takers, and not just, vacuuming out all of their enthusiasm for it.
Absolutely. I've got the utmost respect for somebody who reaches into their wallet or their pocketbook, takes their money out of their own pocket and puts it on the table and says, I'm going to go hire people. I've been visiting so many of those people and hearing some of their frustrations with everything that's out there. You're absolutely correct. Most businesses, most jobs that are created are small businesses. Now, you bring in a large business, it'll create a lot of ancillary type operations around that, but most of those businesses are going to be small. Most of those jobs are created by small business. We've got to start looking at all of those things. We do have, from a perspective of 3.07, at least that's better than 9.99. But you've got regulatory requirements that these, unfortunately, small businesses have to go through. The legal system hurts them. The labor side hurts them tremendously. All of these things are adverse positions that small businesses find themselves in.
Well, I think sometimes, I talk to small business people, too much paperwork. Mm-hmm. I gave you the example about buying a car, you've got this much, stacked up on top.
Exactly.
Like, please make my life easier.
Exactly.
How can that happen?
That's why when you go at this, and one of the things that we're so happy to see, I know to switch from the state side to the federal side from it, there was a federal piece in this federal health care legislation. It would have forced small businesses to file a 1099 for so many more transactions that they do. Fortunately, Congress relented and said, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Would have driven small business crazy. That's the kind of thing that we can't afford to do. We got to let these people, turn them loose, turn the entrepreneurial spirit loose, let them go out and hire our kids so we can keep them here.
Maybe the state and the federal government should get together and have a giant, meeting and figure out how the both can work together.
Maybe a meeting or a paper burning, maybe?
Yeah, and instead of a meeting to set up the meeting. I don't know.
Exactly.
But I just think that's probably the big thing. You've mentioned the lack of legal reform, a perilous legal climate, and its adverse effect on the business community. You also are quoted as saying Pennsylvania's litigation system promotes jackpot justice. I think I know what that means.
Yes.
It's an interesting phrase.
Unfortunately, too much of that is true. For example, the American Tort Reform Association in the last couple of months announced that Philadelphia is the #1 judicial hellhole in the United States. The reality is Pennsylvania has more problems like that than almost every other state. We heard testimony in the legislature a couple months ago from an attorney who represents a lot of Fortune 100 companies who said his clients have more problems in Pennsylvania than all other states that they operate in combined. The reality is we still have something called joint and several liability reform. If you and I and 2 other people get sued, and you are found to be 10% liable, you can be made to pay 100% of the damages. Jed, that's just not fair. And a lot of times it's the small business, not just the large business, but the small business getting pulled into a suit because they might have insurance or the people believe they've got money, and it's not about going to a jury. It's about the settlement side. And the reason we say that others have called this jackpot justice is you bring in a plaintiff's attorney, and to be honest, I don't blame them. They have the ability to do it. They're going to go do it. They drag in everybody they can find and try and get settlement out of them. 41 other states have figured out a way of changing this. Pennsylvania needs to do it. We passed it twice. Once it was struck down by the courts on procedural. Second time it was vetoed by Governor Rendell. We got to figure out how to do this because otherwise we're going to see continuing adverse impact on jobs, doctors, hospitals were going to continue to impair our access to affordable health care in addition to the job side.
Yeah, that was my next place I was going, was health care, you know, frivolous lawsuits, all of that. But it is the elephant in the room. That's what legislators
Absolutely.
have told me. How, and I know you favor competitive bidding from outside carriers from Pennsylvania. How come this hasn't happened? Legislators want to make it happen, but for whatever reason it hits a stone wall or a brick wall.
Well, you bring up an excellent point. When the Federal Health Care Act was passed, there were a number of things. I mean, what we heard a lot from the other side, however you want to paint that, is, oh, business doesn't favor anything. Absolutely wrong. We favored allowing this competitive business to operate across state lines. Our view is if you have more options, they're going to be cheaper, and if businesses have to fight with each other, they're going to fight to drive down that cost and try and deliver you a better product at a better price. We believe that it should have been part of that, along with legal reform. And if you heard Howard Dean say, he was asked somewhere, well, how come we're not doing legal reform? In a moment of frankness, he said, well, because we don't want to offend the trial bar. Those are two key things, along with other things. Well, yes, we do think that kind of the pre-existing condition situation needs to be addressed. We're going to have to find some way of doing that. But in fact, this federal health care bill not only is going to make things more expensive, when we talk about job creation, it's going to hurt job creation. Let me tell you how. The provisions of the bill, of the law, only apply if you are employing 50 people or above. If you're a small business person employing 45 people, you going to add 5? You're probably not. You're going to think twice about whether or not you're going to add to your workforce to make you now in for all the new fines, penalties, and other regulations that the Federal Act brings to you.
So, and I mean, you've got members who are in the healthcare industry and everything, and you know, everybody hits it around 30 seconds or less. What's the long-term prognosis? What can be done?
Long-term prognosis.
Tough to give it in 30, I'm sorry about that.
It's tough to give it in 30. I think we're going to continue to see changes to the federal side. Hopefully we're going to see major changes at the federal side. We're going to have to go to more consumer-driven health care, put more decisions in the hands of the consumer, and let them make the best decisions about how their dollars are spent. All
right, we're with Gene Barr, who's Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Yes, we're going to talk about Marcellus Shale, the attack Marcellus Shale. It is a big controversy going on in the Hill. You're watching For the Record. We'll be back with more after this.